Over the past few years, indie developer Sinn Studio has brought an assortment of budget games to our little headset. There was Wraith, a horror-themed wave shooter, The Perfect Sniper, a narrative-driven game about being an assassin, and Warzone, a first-person, modern military shooter. All three of these games had potential, but every one of them failed to deliver a fun, engaging experience for one reason or another. So when Sinn Studio announced they had a new game on the way, to say we were cautiously optimistic is an understatement. The premise of Swordsman VR is pretty straightforward. You'll start the game off as an untrained sword fighter with no skills and only the most basic of weapons and armor. From there you'll enter arena after arena and take down wave after wave of enemies. And there's no right way to do this. Unlike games such as Golem or Shadow Legend, Swordsman will never instruct you where to put your sword to parry or where to strike your enemy to land a successful counterattack. Just do what feels right and hope for the best. And the combat, for the most part, feels pretty satisfying. The swords carry a bit of weight to them, the only stamina you have to worry about is your own. The physics are fairly realistic and the controls will get you where you need to go once you learn them. Remembering how to retreat or strafe in the heat of battle won't be second nature immediately, but once you get there you'll start suffering fewer and fewer embarrassing deaths, and start to feel really empowered. And when this is all accompanied by an epic soundtrack and the clanging of swords, I found myself really getting into each battle. This isn't Gorn though, so don't expect to be able to grab your opponents and throw them. Swordsman is all about the sword-to-sword combat. But what roped me in the most was the promise that each win meant I was taking more gold and skill points back to my keep to spend on better weapons and upgrading my character's attributes. Everything from strength, HP, critical hits, and agility are represented here, along with something called chronokinesis, which occasionally slows time after a successful parry. And when the very first boss fight caused me to die about 10 times over, I realized that maybe I just wasn't powerful enough to fight him yet. So I moved on to the next stage, and even the stage after that, to keep grinding for more skill points. It's a really fun, really addictive gameplay loop that had me playing for hours at a time. It should be said that the 9 waves of enemies leading up to the boss in each of the 4 main arenas won't offer much variety. Despite the costume changes and new environments, it's all cosmetic. Nothing really changes from stage to stage. Even the difficulty didn't seem to ramp up all that much. Part of the problem is that, as much as I wanted to play the game as intended, it was far too easy to exploit the one-hit kill that results from simply stabbing your opponents in the face. This can be turned off as one of the multitude of modifiers, so if you're up to the challenge, it should be one of the first things that you do. I finally finished Swordsman after about 5 or 6 hours, and despite a few glitches, the non-interactive environments, and the repetitive feeling of killing hundreds of opponents without needing to alter my strategy much, I can honestly say I had a blast playing it. Taking down each boss rewards you with their magical sword, which are all infinitely cooler and way more powerful than any other weapon in the game. The problem is that once you get one, no fights from that point forward, including other boss fights, should present much of a challenge, and the game will be over before you know it. Luckily, once you're done with the campaign, there's still plenty to do in the form of modifiers, which can add some extra challenge, and a freeform mode called the Arena, where you can determine the number of waves, enemies, and difficulty level. After a few disappointing releases, Sinn Studio finally has a hit on their hands with Swordsman VR. It's still a budget game, and it has a bunch of issues that could use improvement, but it's proof that sometimes these things can be overlooked when you're having a good time.